I'm going to talk about a number of things in this video. But to begin, I want to clarify some things that I said in my first Kundalini video. In that video, I talked about how Kundalini spirit can visit those who have not been doing yoga, those who have not had any kind of spiritual practice. It can visit people who have never even heard of Kundalini. And I mean, this is true. It's Kundalini spirit decides. It's a spiritual intelligence, and it decides who it's going to visit and whose chakras it's going to activate and so forth. Which kind of pisses some people off. People who are usually pretty proud of their spiritual practices. They get a little pissed off if Kundalini visits someone who seemingly does not deserve it, someone who's not been working for it. But the thing is, it's the chakra awakening and any kind of dramatic Kundalini experience. That's just part of a process. That's the important thing to know. That's just like a flowering. That's a flowering, but it's a flowering that occurs as part of a process that's been going on for some time. And this process has usually been begun in previous incarnations. And we incarnate, and we have to remember ourselves as spirits. Because the situation is every time we incarnate, we're basically forced to forget everything, and we have to remember all over again, if we're lucky. But any kind of dramatic Kundalini experience, it's a flowering, it's a special moment in a process that's been going on for quite a while. And that's another thing. In my first video, I said that when I talk about Kundalini, I'm usually talking about Kundalini with a capital K, the Kundalini spirit, spiritual intelligence. And I got to thinking maybe that's not totally accurate, because usually when I'm talking about Kundalini, I'm talking about the process, the subjective experience that always stretches out over a period of time. I'm always talking about the process. But actually, since that process is orchestrated by Kundalini spirit, the Kundalini spiritual intelligence, I guess technically when I talk about the process, I am talking about Kundalini spirit. Kundalini spirit, it decides who it's going to visit and when. It's got its own sense of timing, and but basically it visits those who have already been marked by spirit. And that's why I think the title of El Kali's book, Branded by the Spirit, is such a wonderful title. And I'll reference her. I'll be referencing her a lot in my talks about Kundalini. And of course, this is just my opinion. I'm no expert. I'm certainly no paragon of spirituality. I just am what I am. But my opinions, they're based on my own personal experience and observation, and putting things together. But like I said, Kundalini visits those who it already knows, those who are already marked by it, those who are branded by the Spirit. Such an excellent title for a book. And El Kali, who wrote Branded by the Spirit, she talks a lot about shamanistic things as well. And, you know, shamans are taught by Spirit. And it's, you know, we know that they have their process, you know. Shamanic sicknesses are typical. Well, that always happens, and that's part of the process. It's part of the process. And really, it's all, when one is branded by the Spirit, one's life is a long series of initiations, and it's real initiation is always it always comes from Spirit. There's no other kind of initiation. It's Spirit that orchestrates initiation, real initiation. Let me see, look at my notes. Now, in my video about Kriyas and Mudras and so forth, I mention the New Age poseurs and pretenders, and that's something I probably will talk about a lot, especially in this video. You know, there are a lot of people out there who are talking about Kundalini awakenings and teaching others how to facilitate their own Kundalini awakenings and so forth. Like I said, it's orchestrated by Spirit. That's just the way it is. But there are a lot of posers and pretenders out there, especially in the New Age stuff. And, you know, since I pay attention to the process, because I myself, my whole life has been part of a process like that, and nobody told me what was going on. I had to figure it out myself, with the help of Spirit, of course. It took me a long time to realize that it was Spirit that was orchestrating things in my life. But I pay attention to the process, and that's one way I have of spotting the poseurs and the pretenders. You know, they talk about wonderful Kundalini awakenings, and they can talk about even if they're not in the guru position, they might just be New Agers talking about these things. You know, they can say, "Oh, I had this Kundalini awakening," or "I can teach you how to facilitate your Kundalini awakening," or, you know, they might talk about how they feel their chakras whirling, and their 6th and 7th chakras and all that. But if they're questioned and they don't talk about the process, which is an alchemical kind of thing, if they don't talk about the process ever, that makes me very skeptical, very suspicious. I'm like, any kind of Kundalini flowering is typically preceded by a dark night of the soul. Not always, but it's, there are just certain things that happen. It's different with everybody, but they're kind of universals. And so in spotting the pretenders and the poseurs, it's really not so much the big claims they make. It's not, the way I can see that they're poseurs and pretenders, it's not really because of what they say, it's what they don't say. It's what they don't say that gives them away. Like one thing that's worth noting, this is just something very general. Any kind of truly spiritual experience, it's always transformative. It's always transformative. And like I said, typically there's a dark night of the soul. And it's a process. It's not usually comfortable. There's some discomfort. There's some confusion. Honestly, the New Agers, they like to be comfortable. Okay? That's what they're all about. They're all about being comfortable. So I'm real suspicious when they talk about Kundalini awakenings and stuff, and they're also talking about you create your own reality, law of attraction, all these positive affirmations, and so forth. A spiritual transformation is not comfortable. And the New Agers, the pretenders, the poseurs, they're all about being comfortable. They like immediate gratification, which is why they flock to these New Age teachers who can kind of give them techniques and ways of thinking that helps them to feel immediately much better about themselves. It's really not the way it works. It's not the way it works. I'm thinking about the New Age poseurs and pretenders. I can't help but also think of these psychic mediums who talk to the dead. Gosh. No, I believe in clear sensitivities, and I've had a number of paranormal type experiences. I'm not a hyper-skeptic or a disbeliever, non-believer, or pseudo-skeptic or anything like that. I believe in these. It's not so much that I believe in it, it's just that I know that these things do occur because I've experienced them myself. But as far as mediumship and communication from the dead, that's a very, very rare thing. I do know that it exists. I just happen to think that most of the people who are claiming to have that ability, they are mostly liars and con artists, and some of them are just self-deluded. But these superstar psychic mediums, they're like the New Age Kundalini poseurs. They don't really talk about the process so much. Um, um, the poseurs and pretenders, they don't talk about the process of these things because they have not experienced it. So, there's all that subjective experience that they haven't experienced. Like I said, it's not what they say, it's what they don't say that kind of gives them away. Um, um, uh, uh-huh. um, Kundalini is considered to be, a lot of people refer to it as a goddess, Kundalini spirit. It's considered feminine. I don't necessarily get I don't have a feeling of a sense presence of it being feminine or female. However, it makes sense really to think of it as female or feminine because of the process. Kundalini processes they take time. It's got its own sense of timing. It cannot be rushed. And the flowering is like a rebirth. Kundalini processes are a lot like pregnancy, and the flowering is like birth. And the long dark night of the soul is like the death part that precedes the rebirth. And also Kundalini works, it can be very physical, So the fact that it can be very physical, actually it's not just affecting the physical body, it affects all the bodies, the physical body and the subtle bodies. But, as physical beings, we sometimes experience a lot of physicality with it. So since Kundalini works in the physical so much, and since it involves a process that's like pregnancy and childbirth and so forth, it does make sense to think of it as being female or feminine. Like I said, the poseurs, they don't really, they don't talk so much about the process. When they do, they're usually just parroting what they've heard other people say. That's what they have to do because they haven't had the real subjective experience. They can listen, they can read what other people say, listen to videos and so forth, and then they parrot it, which is why they all say the same shit. They all say the same shit, just like with the fake psychic mediums. They all do the same thing, they all say the same kind of shit. It's just what they do. When I think of like the Kundalini poseurs, and I think of Kundalini as feminine in the Kundalini process as being kind of like pregnancy, I was thinking about that, and it reminded me of something I read about years ago in the newspaper or something. It was one of those stories where one of these crazy women had stolen another woman's baby, and she may have killed the mother, I don't remember. Sometimes they do that. They kill the mother and hack her body up and do away the body, and they make off with the baby, and they go somewhere, they move somewhere, some other part of the country, and pretend like that's their baby. I don't know why people do shit like that, but they do. But I was reading about one of these baby thief women, and she was eventually found out. But one of the first inklings that some people had that she might not be really the baby's mother was, I can't remember the details, but she was hanging out with some other women who had children recently, new mothers, And you get women like that, new mothers, hanging out. They're going to talk about their pregnancy process, their childbirth experience, and the hospital and the doctors and who was nice and wasn't and so forth. They're going to talk about that. And but these women begin to think something. They begin to be a bit suspicious of baby thief woman because she never really, when they were talking about the process, she didn't contribute much to the conversation, and when she did, some of the things she would say just seemed kind of off. They were like, what's she talking about? Or it was just very different. And that kind of makes me think of the Kundalini posers and pretenders, because they haven't gone through the real process. Like I said, it's not what they say, it's what they don't say. But anyway, and it might seem strange to talk about Kundalini posers and fake psychic mediums, but it's really not strange because both situations involve unusual perceptions and sensory experiences. But like with the psychic mediums, I just have ways of knowing that they are bullshit artists. Took me a while. I remember, well, first, for a long time, I was just not interested in these psychic mediums who talk to the dead and so forth. I just wasn't interested in it. And then my sister became curious about it and was talking about it for a while, and I don't know, I just got to thinking about it, and so I went on YouTube and was checking them out and stuff. And this was really, it was a few years ago, but, I'll admit there's a part of me that always wants to believe, or at least considers, that these people are telling the truth, and, I try to imagine it and so forth. And I was just, I was like watching how they perform and stuff. And, the naive part of my mind was kind of like, wow, man, they got this incredible sensitivity, but they can still travel all over the country and do shows and get on stage and perform. They still have the stamina to do that, even though they have all this sensitivity. And that's kind of stupid of me. But that, I was thinking that about the time that my own sensitivities were really increasing to the point that it was disabling. And I never I'm not a psychic medium. I don't ever say I'm a psychic. People who really truly are clairsensitive, they don't call themselves psychic. That's kind of like a dirty word. It's and so the fact that these psychic mediums call themselves psychic, that says something about them. But anyway, and like I said, mediumship is a rare thing. And I think it would require a rare level of clairsensitivity. And when you get that level of clairsensitivity, it can be very debilitating. It definitely has an effect on your life. It can even be disabling. But these superstar psychic mediums, do they seem disabled? Do they seem delicate, hypersensitive? No. No, they don't. They're not. And I don't really want to go into specifics, details things I look for specifically. Because I just don't want to give them that kind of information. Anyway, where was I gonna go with all this? Anyway, it's a process. And anybody who makes claims about Kundalini or clairsensitivity, if they don't talk about the process, that is suspect, very suspect. And like with clairsensitivities, it's like, especially if a sensitivity develops later in life, it's a strange thing, and it has an effect on you. It can affect your functioning. It certainly affects your senses and your perceptions. Really, it's like when it occurs later in life, like wasn't necessarily something you were born with. You were probably born with it to a degree, and then it just, at a certain point in your life, it just intensified. And when that happens, it really is like growing a new sensory organ. If you can imagine what that must be like to grow a new organ. Okay. To grow a new sensory organ, even if it's extrasensory, it's real damn confusing, and it takes you a while to figure out what's going on. It's not comfortable. I can't help but think of, there was a movie with Val Kilmer, and he played this guy who was born blind, and at some point when he was in his 20s or 30s, he got an operation that enabled him to see. And it was real exciting at first, but as time went on, it became very stressful to him. And like at the end of the movie, his friends or his girlfriend or somebody, they couldn't understand. They were disappointed, they couldn't understand. They found him, he was starting to cover his eyes. He was covering his eyes. He did not want to see. He didn't want to see anymore. And it's because he was having sensory overload. Think about it. His brain was having to create new neuron pathways and everything. And it was sensory overload. And that's how it is when you develop any new sense, or you experience any kind of new sense that you haven't experienced before. And so, when people talk about, some of these psychic mediums, they say, oh, I've always been like this since I was a little girl, as long as I can remember. I've always seen dead people, and it took me several years before I understood that not everybody else sees the dead people, and it's just, they make it sound like, oh, it was, Grandma used to come talk to me at the foot of my bed, and blah, 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 blah. If they don't ever talk about how it scared the hell out of them sometimes, I'm a bit suspicious. But like, some of the people who, superstar psychics, some of them might claim that, something happened to them in life, car accident, they got hit on the head and so forth, and then all of a sudden they're psychic. Whatever. Or they just developed it. It just flowered. It was just a flowering. Okay, flowering's nice, but there's a process, and it takes some getting used to, and it's not gonna always be comfortable. It's gonna be confusing. It's gonna take you some time to figure out what's going on. Imagine, just to give an example, imagine you are born blind in a world in which just about everybody is also blind. 99.5% of the people in your world are blind, and you are too. There's some talk about this thing called vision, you know. They can only imagine it, and they got, you know, a little bit of folklore about it and so forth. We'll say that you're one of those rare people who, for some reason, you begin to develop the sense of vision. Your brain starts to grow new neurons and pathways, and that happens with your, you know, your eyes and the connections between your eyes and your brain. You say all that starts to form and connect in the way that will enable you to have vision, and that's what happens. Well, you know, you're not going to all of a sudden just one day say, I can see. No. It's going to be a process. It's a process, and it's going to be confusing as hell. And even after you do begin to see, you might not know that that's what's happening to you. How would you know? How would you know? There's not enough information in your world. The language itself is not equipped to really enable you to describe what's going on. So that's just an example, and it seems like a very simple, silly one, but I think it's a good one. You know. So there's always a process involved, and there are, whether it's Kundalini process or the development, unfolding of clear sensitivity, there's a process, and it takes a while. It's a process. There's a lot of subjective experience. Things have to be figured out. Things are confusing, mystifying, and it's not comfortable. It's not comfortable. And the New Agers and the New Age poseurs, all the poseurs and pretenders, they like to be comfortable, especially the New Age people. Discomfort is not on their menu. It's just not there. It's just something they don't do, or they avoid it like the plague. So anyway, it was just a few words about process. Process. I'm going to be talking about process. That's the thing to talk about. Even if you're not talking about anything spiritual, you can be talking about art. You can be talking about cooking. You can be talking about anything. Process. The people who really do it, the people who really experience it, and the people who know something, they're always they talk about the process. They talk about the process. They like to get together with other people like themselves, and they talk among each other about the process. So just keep that in mind. Something to always keep in mind when people are making certain types of claims. Ciao.